Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. Before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to give a shout out to all of my new support group members. What is just stellar groups of people that have joined for this summer cohort. I am so grateful for each of you and am so proud of your big brave that you're showing up and diving in and asking the questions and having compassionate curiosity front and center. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. An announcement coming. I'm so excited about what is coming in the fall with the anniversary date of the Estranged Heart podcast. I've been busy, a busy little bee working on all sorts of things behind the scenes. And I am super stoked to bring these to you guys in the fall. So stay tuned for that. And just I'm really excited. Lots of changes with the podcast. I mean, it'll still be the same yet different, and some new and different things coming on board. So be listening for more information on that to come. And if you're looking for support and feel like either a support group could be helpful for you or one-on-one coaching, please feel free to email me, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. I'm happy to help if that is of interest to you. There will be a new group of new cohorts that will start for the support groups in, I believe it will be after Labor Day. These current groups will end around the first to mid part of August, and then I will start again after the Labor Day holiday. So if you're interested in joining those, let me know. Email me, theestrangedheart@gmail.com, or after today, there will be information on the website if you'd like to go there, theestrangedheart.com. So I think that's everything. So let's dive into today's episode. Hi there. Welcome back to a new episode of the Estranged Heart podcast. Today's episode is titled Apology versus Amends. What's the difference? And I will say, there's a big difference. And so if this is something that you're like, I don't know that I necessarily know the difference. I know that I went a long time without knowing the difference. And I think that for the most part, most of us do. We kind of interchange apology and amends to mean the same thing. And they're not. So I wanted to kind of break this down in today's episode because we talk about them so much in the world of estrangement. So before we start, I have two quotes for today. The first is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that is by Anonymous. And the second is, it's hard to see your progress when you are deeply immersed in the process. Before you let doubt take control, examine how much you've grown or accomplished by mentally taking a step back so you can look at the entire picture. And that is by Jung Pueblo. So, apology versus amends. When we have hurt or otherwise wronged someone, or when someone has felt having been wronged or hurt by us, it's typical protocol for us to apologize, right? But how often do we contemplate what an apology actually is? In the world of estrangement, the word amends is often discussed, at least on the parents' side. We're talking oftentimes about making amends, writing amends letters, etc., things like that. But how often do we contemplate what an amends actually is? So I came across a poll that was conducted by a licensed marriage and family therapist in 2022. Her name is Whitney Goodman. And she polled her Instagram audience, which is very large. And by and large, I think most of her followers are estranged adult children. And she simply asked in the poll, has your parent ever apologized? And 47% said absolutely not. 30% said not that I can recall. 21% said a few times. And 2% said they apologize regularly. And I was stunned by that. Only 2% of the folks that responded to this poll that she did said their parents on a regular basis apologize to them. Now, I know that some parents are probably saying, well, my God, why does a parent need to apologize on a regular basis for things? And I would reply to that by saying, you're a human being. By default, you make mistakes. You're not perfect. As a matter of fact, most of us probably all should be running around apologizing a lot more than we do. So I wanted to put this out at the front of this episode because I felt it was really, really important. Um, it's something that I see a lot of parents, estranged parents, struggle with in writing an amends letter or making a verbal amends to their adult child. And so I thought if I could break this down, maybe it would help some folks to understand the difference in just saying I'm sorry versus making an amends. So let's talk about what each one of these are. And then I have an example, a personal example to use. I probably could have many personal examples to use based off of my own experience with my own kids. But I want to use an example of me as the adult child and one of my parents. So, first, an apology is a typically verbal, I'm sorry. We apologize for having hurt someone. And that's typically only done when we agree with the person that I hurt them. We can see it, we know it, and we say I'm sorry. However, oftentimes we apologize because we only apologize to prevent a loss. So, and you typically see this like in romantic relationships, right? He never apologizes, I'm out. She never apologizes, I'm out. Right? So there's some sort of threat. And if we looked at that, if we pulled back and looked at that through the lens of estrangement, we would see that today too, from the adult children if there's not an apology or an amends, then I'm out and I'm done with this relationship. So it's like guilting someone into to making an apology, or we do it instinctually because we don't want to experience that loss if a person does remove themselves from our life. So it's not a genuine apology, and those can be those the other person feels that. They know when it's a true apology and when it's not. Okay. An amends is the actions following the words. The amends is what begins to rebuild trust within the relationship. It allows for I'm often talking about folks just want to be seen, heard, and validated. It allows for that. When we make an amends, it's that the other person feels seen, heard, and validated for the most part. Um, it allows us to take responsibility and restores, on some level, our own self respect and leaving behind that feeling of shame. And it can help to build integrity with our own reputation. When we can make amends, we become a quote unquote trustworthy person. Again, going back to what I originally said, an amends is an action that begins to rebuild trust. Okay. So, the an example that I want to give is, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I'm currently in Florida, um, helping to caretake for my parents. Now, my parents are, they're independent, they're living on their own, but they are aging, and there's just, I felt like there was a need to be a little closer to them and to help and assist where I could. So there are some things that are happening within our family, and there will be an episode forthcoming at some point with regards to this. I haven't been able to formulate exactly how I want to do that yet, so it hasn't happened. But this is a piece of what will be forthcoming later. So I was in conversation with my dad, and it was a pretty heated argument. And when I say heated, he was very angry um, at some of the things that my mother and I were doing to help him. And he's very independent, thinks he's 35 years old and he's almost 80, and so there's certain things that he can't do. And anyway, long story short, he just flew off the handle and was very mad. And so my one of my daughters suggested at one point, prior to this disagreement my dad and I were having, um, she said, Mom, have you thought about sitting down and talking to him about how you changed your anger? Because my dad has always been an angry person. There's a good reason for that, based off of his childhood trauma. However, it doesn't bode well for his relationships now, and it hasn't for much of his adult life. So my daughter says, have you thought about sitting down and talking to him about how you used to be angry and you've transformed that, and how you healed your relationships with your kids? And I thought, wow, no, I I haven't considered that. Thank you, oh wise one. And so when this argument came up, this heated, him being very very heated with me, I thought, maybe now I can help him to understand kind of what he's in the moment experiencing, and helping him to understand that I get where he's coming from, and also how I transform that. Well, if anybody knows, anyone who is angry is not going to listen to you in the moment. And I never should have done it, but I did. And I said to him, Dad, and I was in a very calm tone. I said, Dad, there was once a time when I was really angry in my life, much like you are right now. And I did a lot of work to come out of that so that I could have healthy relationships with the people that mean something to me. And that's all I'm trying to do, is to help you to figure out a different way to do this besides being so angry and damaging relationships, and not to mention your own health, having a heart attack or something like that because your blood pressure is through the roof. And he jumped up, kind of threw his arms in the air and screamed, "Just forget about it," as I had poured out my heart to him. And I was immediately triggered. It sent me right back to some childhood moments that I had had, growing up with feeling dismissed, and that no one was listening to me, and I wasn't being seen, and I wasn't being heard, and I wasn't being validated. Now, in all fairness, I wasn't doing that for him either. So, what I did in that moment of having been triggered is that I looked at my mom. And I was crying, and I was very, very hurt that he had dismissed me in such a harsh way. And he's never been like that with me before. And before anyone asks, no, he doesn't have dementia, and no, that's not what this is all about. Um, so I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I'm leaving. If you need anything, you know where I'm at. But I am not going to stay here and have my feelings invalidated this way. And out the door I went. I live a mile and a half from them. I live in the same community with them. And I did not see or talk to my dad for 2 weeks after that. Now, estranged parents are probably thinking, "What? She was an estranged parent at one time. She knows how much that hurts a parent, and why would she be doing this?" The reason I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to understand, and when I share this entire story, I want you to understand what is happening for the adult child to cause them to disengage. In that moment, I had to get away from him. My nervous system was completely unregulated in that moment. I was angry, I was hurt, and I didn't know what to do with it. Right? Again, because this is not the normal relationship that I have with my dad. So, and I will say, for those folks out there that are like, "Well, I've never had a normal relationship with my parents and I get triggered all the time." Yes. If you haven't had a normal relationship and it's always been dysfunctional, you will be triggered again and again and again. So, that's a side note. Back to the story. So, I took time away from my dad so that I could wrap my head around what had just transpired, and why I was trying to figure out why he was being so full of rage and fury. And I needed time to sit with my hurt, with my own pain, and not just trying to figure him out, but trying to sort through my feelings. And how did I do that? I did, my normal processing and getting curious and asking those questions. I sat with my therapist and we walked through these things multiple different times, and trying to uncover and unravel that tangled story that was happening. So I finally get to a place where I feel like I can re-engage with him. And I decide, I was out and about and I was coming back home, and I thought, well, I'm gonna run by mom and dad's and see how this goes. And I kind of did it as a test. And so I showed up, and it was a very, I felt very awkward. And, um, he opened the door, he said, hey, and went and sat back down. We didn't talk much. My mom came out, and she and I talked and had conversation. And I was there maybe an hour or so. And my dad and I, like, again, didn't, there really wasn't any conversation between the two of us. And he did make a couple of comments to my mom and a comment about something that was on TV. And I noticed that I was on pins and needles, right? I was just like, on pins and needles. I don't understand what is happening here. And so, anyway, when I left, I started to think about that again. And that was me being, I was on hyper alert. And this is what the kids do. They get on hyper alert. And so when you're in hyper alert, your nervous system is not regulated. So any little thing that is said or done can be taken out of context, blown up, appears to be bigger than what it actually is, when in reality what is happening is that the nervous system is so dysregulated that all of those triggers that would normally be a quote unquote average trigger, if you will, become big triggers because of past experiences and the relational history that you have. So fast forward, um, I'm with my mom, and another point, and my dad calls and talks to my mom, and I'm with her, and she tells him, and he says, um, she had him on a speakerphone, and he said, well, tell her I'm sorry. And she said, well, here, you tell her yourself. And so she handed me the phone. He said, I'm sorry. And I said, thank you for the apology, Dad. However, changed behavior would be much more appreciated. And he said, I know, I'm trying. And in that moment, I thought to myself, well, you're not trying really hard, because every interaction with you, whether it's me or other people in our family or strangers or acquaintances, are having the same result. And when someone tries, those results are not the same over and over and over and over and over and over again. There is some sort of movement or shift that happens. So, back to today's episode topic of men apologies versus amends. My dad apologizes all the time. Apologizes all the time. But he's not been making amends. He is not changing his behavior, which would then help to rebuild trust with myself and reduce the angst when I'm around him, and reduce, my nervous system dysregulation, and allow me to be in a place of calm and peace when I'm around him. And that's the purpose of an amends. So, um, so I wanted to just kind of clarify what that was and what the difference is. So, how do we make an amends, right? An apology is saying I'm sorry, or writing I'm sorry on a piece of paper or note or whatever. To make an amends, you have to acknowledge your role in the situation, right? It's the crucial first step, and without it, you can't change your behaviors. If you don't own up to your part in it, you have no awareness around that. You have no awareness that you need to change something. And you have to have an awareness of needing to change something before you can change something, right? Generally. And in acknowledging your role in this situation also considers things from the other person's perspective. How did how did your mistake affect them, affect their life? Did you let them down? My dad let me down when he brushed off and, well, when he dismissed. He didn't brush off, he dismissed my feelings. Did you cause them inconvenience, or were they offended by something you said or did? Um, you know, writing it down or talking about it with a therapist or a coach, on how your actions caused pain to the other person also helps you to develop empathy. So, this is what I do with my clients, my estranged parent clients, when I'm helping them to write an amends letter. I am helping them to take ownership of some things that they may have done in relation to their children. Um, and I tell them every single time, do not write an amends letter if your behavior isn't going to change, because you might as well null and void the amends letter, and your kid is going to be really pissed off because they've gotten this amends letter, and for some gotten their hopes up that things have changed, and then they meet up with you or have a conversation with you over the phone and they see that nothing has changed, and then they have zero trust in you moving forward. Okay. You want to plan your approach. You want to let the other person know that you understand and you care about the mistake that you made and its impact on them, right? My dad's apology, I'm sorry, said nothing about, I know that that hurt you when I dismissed your feelings, right? There was none of that. Um, your response in making an amends should help restore the balance, um, and help the other person, the balance within your relationship, and help the other person to grow or heal in some way. If my father had made an amends, he would have helped me to have healed that hurt that I experienced when he dismissed my feelings. Okay. Now, a caution here, because sometimes guilt, we can feel guilty about something and then we tend to overcompensate in making an amends. And when we overcompensate, that tends to lead the other person to believe you're not sincere, right? You're like going over the top with your amends, and that's not necessarily, it's generally not a sincere approach. So there's that. You want to communicate your intentions. You want to acknowledge that the mistake was made and your role in it. You want to address how your actions affected the other person and how it made them feel, and communicate how important the relationship is to you. That's another big piece. You must communicate how important this relationship is to you. People need to hear that. And if they don't, a lot of them just assume it's not important. Okay? And then you need to learn from your mistakes. So make sure you understand what has happened, find value in this learning process, use it as a learning tool to grow and evolve. Again, to change your behaviors, to do it differently, and understand the value in doing it differently. Okay. So, this is how we use change as a catalyst for growth and healing, and reconciliation. If you continue to do the same things you've always done, you're going to continue to get what you've always gotten. That's just bottom line. Okay. So I hope that this has been helpful in helping you to understand the differences in an apology versus an amends. An amends is super, super, super important for estranged parents and their adult children. And yes, it is my belief that the parents need to lead the way. Um, so that's, whether you agree with that or not. But I'm here to tell you that if you don't apologize and make an amends to your children, and even and here, let me just back up a minute. Most adult children that I've talked to, I say most, many adult children that I've talked to have said to me, I don't need an apology. I need changed behavior. So what they're saying is, I don't need an apology. I just need an amends. You're going to do this differently moving forward. Okay? So if you would like support around trying to figure out what to make an amends for, how to make an amends, all of those types of things, understanding this in greater detail and how it can apply to your specific situation, and you would like some one-on-one coaching, please let me know. Feel free to email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com, and I am happy to help you get on track as best we can with trying to reconcile with your adult child. And I believe I will leave it there for now. Until next time. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.